Well, here we are back in 1973 with yet another depressing cold open. It wasn't depressing up until last year. Now it's depressing. Yeah, we've really gotten the short shrift, I think. Maybe there wasn't a lot of happy news in 1973.
Well, there's a lot of happy news in 1973. Well, it's just gotten depressing since.
Yeah, well, that's 50 years later. More things change, the more they stay the same. So 50 years ago, Roe versus Wade is affirmed by the Supreme Court, only to be turned over, which we'll get into in a second. Hopefully everyone listening to this podcast knows all about Roe v. Wade, but we're going to get into it very quickly. Roe v. Wade was a landmark decision, obviously, by the U.S. Supreme Court that ruled that the Constitution generally protects a woman's right to have an abortion. It should always protect the woman's right to abortion, and a woman should be able to do whatever the fuck she wants with her body. Thank you. It was a 7-2 majority, which actually is wild to think about now, 50 years later. Justice Byron White and future Chief Justice William Rehnquist, no surprise, dissenting. And then, of course, as we know, in June 2022, which I can't believe it's been a fucking year, the court reversed this decision in Dobbs v. Jackson. An argument stating that abortion was not considered a right when the Due Process Clause was ratified in 1868. Like, let's go back as far as we possibly can to dig up some bullshit.
Yeah, like all of our founding fathers were slave owners. So do we really want to base all of our decisions today on what they thought? Like that is just so troubling to me. But and I think it's bullshit. I think it's in bad faith that a lot of these justices are like, I'm an originalist. I'm like, no, you're not. You're a bigot. And you're just using that as a cheap excuse to do what you want and say, oh, this is discrimination and this is not, despite the fact that most of these old white men have never been discriminated against a day in their fucking lives. Boom.
I mean, 1868, that's before Plessy v. Ferguson. Like, that is insane to me. That is insane to me. Many legal scholars believe that this stupid-ass precedent, when slavery was barely non-legal, but still kind of legal, puts other rights, including contraception, interracial marriage, and same-sex marriage at risk. And yes, we know the Congress passed the Defense of Marriage Act, but abortion bans are rampant. We just had one at the time of this recording in Iowa, which was 6 weeks. An abortion ban at 6 weeks, because that's when you can first hear the heart and you know there's heartbeat.
Fetuses don't have hearts. They don't have heartbeats.
And a lot of people don't know they're fucking pregnant at 6 weeks.
No, you can hear this dunk, 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 dunk. It sounds like a heartbeat, but that is not a heartbeat. It's just, that is such bullshit. It's the whole thing is so crazy. But here's the one ray of hope I have. The fact that this is 50 years old, that Roe v. Wade was affirmed 50 years ago, means that no American, I was about to say no American woman, but truly no American under the age of 55 can really remember before Roe v. Wade. It's kind of in our consciousness that, if you get pregnant and you don't want to be, you can get an abortion. Like, that just seems like the way it is. And I think that a lot of these abortion bans are not going to go well when they're actually put in place. People are going to be like, no, this is my body and I don't want to be pregnant, and no. And we'll see how it all falls out. But I'm hoping that it's not going to be another 50 years before we fix this one and it goes back to the way it should be.
I mean, a majority of Americans have said that they do. They don't
vast
support
majority, 78% think that abortion should be legal. So what this court is doing and who they think they're pleasing, I have no idea.
And donate to your local abortion funds, because they use the money to help people get abortions, even in these trying times. So.
Welcome to the Rewind Project, where Allie, Matt, and Eric take another look at your favorite milestone movies through the lens of our present day. Will it be a skip, rent, or buy? Stay tuned and find out.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Rewind Project. Today we're going to be talking about some slightly upset streets. We're going to be...
I was wondering how you were going to take that.
Passive-aggressive streets.
Slightly racist streets.
Yes. Today we're going to be talking about Martin Scorsese's 1973 film Mean Streets. Screenplay by Martin Scorsese and Mardik Martin, and directed by Martin Scorsese.
Who's Mardik Martin? I don't know that name.
Somebody that wrote.
He was never heard from again. I have no idea.
Maybe it's Martin Scorsese's alter ego. So really, he just did this, and he didn't want to take the credit for like the whole screenplay. So he just made.
Or maybe Marty is the real Charlie, and Mardik was the real Johnny Boy, and he's no longer with us.
Maybe. I think part of that is true for sure.
So notable achievements. There really aren't any. Robert De Niro won Best Supporting Actor in 1974 New York Film Critics Circle Awards. I think they might have been a little biased.
Oh, no, Matthew. Robert De Niro was, whatever faults this movie might have, which I think you are seeing a lot more than I am, it is not Robert De Niro's fault. He was great. Robert De Niro was like, as a young actor playing somebody who was utterly unhinged. I mean, he was committed to what he was doing. And he played, you look at it now and it's like we've seen Robert De Niro play violent and crazy before. So it's not anything really new. But he's Robert De Niro. He was good.
He was okay. The character was just,
Folks, I am not the crankiest person about this movie. I just want to say that for the record.
And you didn't even pick this movie.
Usually I'm pretty cranky if I don't like a movie, but I actually didn't mind this movie. So yeah, we'll get into it. But I'm pleased that I'm not the cranky one today.
The other notable achievement is 1997. It was selected for preservation into the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress, who deemed it culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant for some reason or other.
Do we think that was just because it was Scorsese's first movie, or?
Well, it's not. He directed 2 films beforehand, and the first one he kind of had some hand in it, but it wasn't really all his material. So I guess this really is his first, he wrote it and directed his movie. So maybe that's why it got in. He's done better films.
Okay. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people, when you look back, have very, very, laudable things to say about this movie. I think that we have to kind of admit that there are film historians and, film scholars out there who say there's a lot to this. The one thing that's not here, and I know, Matt, you don't like this, but in 2013, the editors of Entertainment Weekly put together their own list of 100 best movies of all time, and this movie was number 7 on that list.
They can make as many lists
crazy.
as they want.
I will admit that that's crazy.
I don't think it probably deserves to be there either, but I do think that, at some level we have to kind of say, look, a lot of people who do know what they're talking about say that there's a lot to this movie and that they really think that people should watch it. I don't like it that much, but I do have to kind of say, for however it looks to us 50 years later, there must be something to it, because a lot of really wonderful directors, Spike Lee, Catherine Bigelow, will go back and say, this movie meant a lot to me in terms of my own evolution as a director. I'm like, there's got to be something there. We can't just write it off as being just a total piece of shit.
Maybe it inspired them because they thought they could do better. I don't know. It's all personal takes. So let's actually start talking about the movie then, instead of me just trashing it. So plot: a criminal upstart ignores the sage advice of his mafioso uncle and spends most of his time protecting the useless dirtbag cousin of the woman he is secretly dating, until he kind of pays for his stupidity, but not really. So
as always, logline on point.
Yeah, I
have no quibbles with that logline that you wrote.
It's just
can't argue with that.
Nope.
Yeah. We'll get into it because the ending wasn't. Okay, so starting off the cast, Harvey Keitel as Charlie,
the hottest person in the movie. I've never been attracted to Harvey Keitel. He has definitely gotten uglier as he's gotten older. Honestly, who among us? But he was snackable in this movie.
He could fill out a white tank. He certainly could.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah. I was like, oh, that was probably the most shocking thing to the movie, that I was finding Harvey Keitel attractive.
Well, part of it was that Harvey Keitel was playing somebody who was likable.
Yeah,
he was the good guy, and he had a moral sense to him, which is not true for most of the other folks in this movie. And so you're inclined to kind of follow him anyway. And he was a young man. So, yeah.
He was good, though. I mean,
apparently a lot of people found him sexy in The Piano. I did not. That whole movie was a little...
I've actually never seen The Piano. I'm okay with that.
I find the whole thing kind of off-putting. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of that movie anyway. But he was the man who lured Holly Hunter away from her arranged marriage with Sam Neill. And the sex scene was pretty explicit, and a lot of people kind of was like, ooh, Harvey, and I'm like, he was hotter in this.
Also, who would pick Harvey Keitel over Sam Neill? Not me.
Well, Sam Neill played an asshole in that movie, so I mean, there was the part. It was mostly about who they were as people, but yeah,
interesting.
No, I enjoyed Harvey Keitel in the film. I thought he was the most likable character, although at the same time, at some point, you gotta just like cut your losses with, your friends that you're trying to protect. Like,
I also agree with that.
And I think that may be part of the message of the film, but I would say that what you just said, Matt, the film agrees with you. The film is like, don't be this guy, right? And while presenting him as someone who's likable, the film is kind of saying to you, it's like, if you have people in your life who are just going to drag you down, then it's not worth it. But of course we can't learn that lesson until we see somebody who's like, no, I'm going to save him. I wondered, as a former Catholic, if some of the Catholicism stuff was maybe a little bit too subtle. And it wasn't that subtle. I mean, every time Harvey Keitel ran his fingers over a flame, like, we got it, right? Like, he was all obsessed with burning in hell one day and trying to do everything he could to be a good, upstanding person while working for a mafioso uncle. And so he's already conflicted there. But clearly his whole thing about trying to rehabilitate and save his girlfriend's cousin, who is also his childhood friend. I mean, I think that's more describes the bond between Charlie and Johnny. They've known each other for a long, long time. And he just feels like, if I can save this guy, if I can get him on the straight and narrow, then that's my ticket to eternal life. Which, again, as a former Catholic, I was like, oh, Charlie, give it up. This is it's not going to work out for you. Also because, Johnny Boy, as we'll get into, was not really worth saving and not interested in being saved.
Well, I think that was part of the reason. The part of my problem with this movie is that I never got any sense of the friendship outside of him just always trying to protect him. You know what I mean? Like, it was just a bunch of guys hanging out most of the time, and we're getting drunk and doing stupid shit is basically what I got most of the time. I didn't get a sense of an actual friendship between the two of them. It was just him looking out for this kid for some reason, and I couldn't figure it out. So I think it's poor writing.
The one time that I did is when they were, and it was when they all maybe escaped from the bar after the guy got shot, which we'll get into. But they're walking down the street and they like pick up the garbage can lids and start playing and start reminiscing about some of the old times. And I was like, okay, this is where we're setting some of the, but it's interesting that was a lot later. I mean, when you meet Charlie and Johnny and see them interact for the first time together, you get the idea real quick. Like, this Robert De Niro character is not worth it. Like, whatever it is you're trying to do with him, he's not worth it. And they waited until a little, about halfway through the movie before they gave you any glimmer of why these two people even hang out.
I like the scene too where they were in his apartment and they were, trying to figure out whether they were going to break into Robert De Niro's parents' house to get food, and like that was, I could see the relationship then at that point.
And the fact that they were sharing a bed in a way that was not homoerotic at all. Like, there was absolutely no hint that anything else was going on. But when you see two men in a double bed sleeping, like, these were just two guys who were just like, I'm fucking tired, I'm sleeping, Right,
and probably did it as they were growing up. I mean, like, definitely I've shared beds with, my sister or my cousin, like stuff like that. Like, it's no
you would
big deal.
Expect these macho guys to have a real problem with it, unless they are that close. And so that was another glimmer that was like, oh, these two guys go way, 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 way back.
I guess I needed more of that. And it just didn't add up enough for me. I just never got a sense of why Charlie should be covering for Johnny, because Charlie's ruining his own reputation around town and digging himself into a financial hole here too, trying to help this guy.
Yep.
So it just never made sense for me. So
I mean, I guess that's probably the ultimate question of this movie is how far do you go for family?
yeah.
And who do you consider family? And at what point do you break it off? And that's why I thought every single time I was like, Charlie, what the fuck are you doing? He would run his fingers over a gas stove again. And I'd be like, oh, right. Hell. Okay. All right.
I thought it was more that he was just trying to get a sense of feeling of something, like he was just dulled inside.
No, that was Catholicism, pure and simple. That was, in case you ever started to wonder. And not that it's listen, Catholics, commit cannibalism and they drink blood every Saturday. Like, it's a weird religion. It is. I mean, it's just objectively weird. And as an ex-Catholic, I feel like I can say this. It does a number on you. I mean, the whole thing about Catholic guilt, didn't grow up Jewish. Maybe Allie can speak to this.
It's very similar.
Catholic guilt is fucking real. I mean, you are raised with a guilt, and I still suffer from Catholic guilt. I am no longer a Catholic, but if I say anything that makes anyone feel even the slightest little pinch, I feel bad about it for days. I mean, it's a disease.
I grew up Protestant. I don't have any guilt. According, that came from the religion itself. We just thought you were going to hell, so you're just always scared all the time. But it wasn't good.
Man, religions suck, man.
Yeah, religions do suck. We've already started talking about him, so let's talk about Robert De Niro as Johnny Boy next.
He's so good at playing those characters that are just like charming enough that you let them get away with things that you normally wouldn't, which I admire very much, because I also feel like I can sometimes turn on my charm and get away with a lot of shit, or at least I did when I was growing up.
I guess that was the other thing that got me, is I didn't find him charming at all. Like, you could see through his bullshit immediately. So like, that's why, like, all the people surrounding Charlie, they put up with Johnny because they like Charlie. Mm-hmm. There was nothing about Johnny that they found charming. They already knew he was a two-bit con that was never going to pay him back. I mean, and we'll talk about Michael later, but like, there was nothing about him in this movie that I found compelling or charming.
I would agree. I think that, this is young Robert De Niro. He kind of had a little bit of baby fat. He had a little bit of bad skin. Like, there was just, there was something, like, nothing about him was even, attractive from a physical standpoint, or the way that he behaved. He behaved like a narcissistic asshole the entire time. So it was like completely up to Harvey Keitel to bear the burden of this whole, like, trying to get the audience to understand why he was doing what he was doing. I think I gave the movie a little bit of grace just because I get the whole Catholic thing. And I also understand in the Italian culture, like, once you consider somebody family, you don't turn your back on them. Like, I got all that, and that's where Martin Scorsese comes from as well. And he was a young filmmaker when he was doing this. So maybe he just assumed that folks would get it. And I think a lot of people who watched the movie did get it. If they were at all familiar with Italian-American culture or Catholicism or anything about New York's Little Italy neighborhood, they kind of picked it up. But it didn't spell out a lot of that stuff for you. Yeah. And maybe that's a bit of the disconnect.
I mean, and to Allie's earlier point, like, Robert De Niro generally is fucking charming on screen. Like, really, really charming. I just did not get it this time. Like, I don't, maybe it's because this was early off in his career. I don't know.
And maybe there's a bit of confidence that comes from being Robert De Niro, badass movie star. I mean, he won an Oscar. He won his first Oscar the year after this was made for The Godfather Part 2. This was, I don't think a whole lot of people in the world necessarily knew who Robert De Niro was when this came out. And he was like second billing. We're going to find out real fast. Because Raging Bull was not going to come long after that. And that pretty much cemented him. Like, he is a brilliant actor. And I don't think that he had that reputation with this one, but I think that this movie probably helped get him there. Again, he won Best Supporting Actor from the New York Film Critics Circle Awards. That's not nothing. Not everyone gets that award.
Again, slightly biased, but okay.
Whatever, but I mean, he won it. And people looked at him like, oh, probably a lot of people looked at him like, oh, this is one to watch. This is somebody who is could potentially do great things. And he did.
So next up is Richard Romanus as Michael.
Never heard of him.
I think you've probably seen him in other things. He is more of a character actor, it seems like, as I started to look through his IMDb. In the movie, I liked him actually, I shouldn't say I liked him. I thought he did pretty good in the film. His character is just a dumbass. Like, I don't understand why you're, again, continuing to shell out cash, thinking you're ever going to get any of it back from Johnny. You are a jerk, and he was playing you off like a jerk off. You should have realized that, like, $1,000, not $3,000.
And what did he finally get? 10?
10. He would have taken the 20. He would have taken the 20, but the 10, that was just really insulting.
Yeah, well.
Or the 30.
When he owes $3,000. Okay, Michael. Yeah. Not much of a negotiator, Michael.
No.
Well,
everyone was kind of dumb in this movie.
Well, they also didn't seem like gangsters. Like, none of them do. Like,
right? They seem like, I don't know, like Simpsons gangsters.
Yeah. It's like none of them even have guns. When Johnny finally pulls the gun on Michael, he about wets himself and like runs away. It's like, and then comes back later with a gun to start killing them or try to kill Johnny, like in a car chase. Like, the last 15 minutes of the movie started to turn into an actual gangster film. I don't know what the fuck was going on in the beginning of the rest of the movie.
Okay, so I got online to Wikipedia before I watched this movie to say, what is the plot of this movie? And I'm like, I don't care about spoilers. Like, just tell me what I'm about to see. And there were 3 paragraphs of plot.
Yeah.
The first paragraph was the first hour and 30 minutes of an hour and 45-minute movie. The second 2 paragraphs of plot were the last 15 minutes of the movie. I spent the entire thing going, did he pull a gun on Michael? Like, what? When did that happen? And it didn't happen until the movie had 15 minutes to go. And suddenly we had a plot.
Yeah.
The rest of it was a lot of mood and a lot of kind of, let's look at Charlie, who's conflicted because, he really feels like he needs to protect this guy. And let's watch Robert De Niro get in more and more and more trouble in a menacing kind of way without anything really happening.
I guess that was the thing, because we barely even got, the uncle, who we'll talk about in a second. Like, we saw flashes of him. So I feel like he was trying to build, like, a setting for the life that Charlie lived in, but I feel like the story suffered at him trying to spend so much time setting up that mood of his life. It was just really, it was a boring film. I fell asleep and then like had to force myself to watch it again the next night to like finish it off.
I will say I was also like, I'm not as down on this movie as you are, Matt, but I was also like, is anything going to happen?
Yes, same.
Because right now, and when I kind of thought when they went to that guy that they called a mook or a jerk off or whatever in the pool hall, and they had, that was a pretty action filled fight sequence in the pool hall with like, Charlie and his old gang against the pool shark and their whole gang and all that kind of stuff. But I was like, at the end of it, I'm like, did that advance anything that we might call a plot, or did that just kind of happen and we just got to see it? And I think it was more the second. It was just like, this is Charlie's life. This is what he does. This is his job. And it's not very pleasant.
But it also struck me as like a high school cafeteria fight scene. Like, this is just a bunch of teenagers just like getting rowdy. This was not like a real... There were no stakes in any of this. And I think that, I never felt a criminal underground or element. It was just a bunch of guys hanging out. And that, I don't know, I guess that's the thing. I was like, I maybe expected too much from this film and expecting that it was going to be some kind of crime drama. And it was not. That is not what you get when you watch this movie.
Crime is not that violent, though. The whole thing about the restaurant owner who can't pay, right? Yeah. That was clearly, that wasn't like a legitimate rent payment. That was paying off the mob for some
that's
kind
protection.
of favor.
That's
was
protection.
For protection. But I mean, but that was a criminal enterprise going to that guy and saying, "We need your money." And the guy saying, "I really don't have the money," but I mean, that's Charlie's job. Like, I mean, being a mobster, and I think that part of why maybe people appreciated this movie is that, you know, being a mobster is not all gunfights in Italian restaurants. It's sometimes just going to the old guy and saying, "Hey, we need your payment." And he's like, "Oh, I don't really have the money yet." And that's it. I mean, that's it. But then Charlie had to go back to his uncle and say, he didn't have the money. What am I going to do? I should, you know, and the uncle's like, "Don't worry about it. He's a good guy." Da, da, da. You know, that's it. That's the movie.
I mean, so it's the Godfather. I mean, it's the reverse Godfather.
It's the boring. It's like if we took the Godfather and the Godfather was only about the inner workings of how like low level people go on their day-to-day business. That's what it is.
That's it. This is middle management Godfather.
Correct. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yes.
This is Godfather space. Let's just say that.
But yeah, I don't think there was a huge budget attached to this movie. And I don't think that they had, you know, but I think that it probably was a lot more realistic than a lot of movies about the mob, because it's not all that exciting most of the time. It's just picking up your payments, you know, and Michael was just a loan shark. I mean, all he had was money to give and money to collect. I mean, that's the only thing that he was a loan shark. And so, and Johnny Boy was probably a gambling addict. You know, we didn't see that, you know, but, you know, he was more and more and more and more in the hole all the time, but never seemed to pay a price for it. So really didn't care, which is infuriating. But
well, and that was and he never paid the price for it because of Charlie. Like Charlie
always had his back, and he never had to worry about any consequences. Which, when you're already maybe a little bit of a sociopath, that becomes a problem.
Yep. Yeah, because then you're just feeding into the behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was an enabler, is really what Charlie was.
Absolutely.
He's an enabler. He's not doing him any favors. Fourth of the friends here, or I guess you can call them friends, was David Proval as Tony. So who is I guess he actually owned the bar that Michael operated out of.
He was the first one that got the freeze frame, and it's like, Tony. Okay. Guess that's Tony. Remember that name. It'll be important later on. Although, was it? Was Tony really integral to the story at all, other than just somebody who was there?
Hey, he owned a tiger. No, was it a tiger? It was a
yeah.
Panther.
What was the tiger?
No,
that was the most bizarre sequence. Why do you have a tiger in a cage in the back of your bar? That is
no. It was a panther. It wasn't a tiger, because he said he wanted a tiger, but he couldn't get it.
That's right. Yes, it was. You're right.
It's
You're right.
Panther.
It was a big, scary cat
Yeah.
that he could, you know, get into the cage with, and everyone else is looking like, you're going to get eaten.
Maybe it's just like, let's show how all of these people are mentally unstable. I don't know.
I guess. I mean, that is a crazy thing to do. In New York City, to have a jungle cat in a cage, well, highly. But also nuts. Like, it's just, there's nothing sane or rational about that decision. That was the most bizarre scene. And I honestly just looked at this, I'm like, did Martin Scorsese, was he able to get his hands on a cat and thought, oh, I need to put this in my movie somehow? Because it made no fucking sense. That was bizarre.
Maybe he just knew somebody that already had one, so they just...
Or there's some symbolism deep into that whole scene that just went over my head. I don't know.
I think Tony was just looking for true love, and so he wanted a big cat that he could cuddle with. That's really...
Or he just was gonna, I don't know. There is a lot, as I know from SVU, there is a lot of illegal exotic animal trafficking in New York City.
Okay.
Maybe that's how Tony made all his money instead of the bar, because the bar didn't seem...
He had a lot of space in the back there. Like,
he did have...
like,
I mean, that's prime real estate.
Enough for a panther.
Right. Plus, like, all of his, you know, bartending shit. Plus, also, you know, like a cot that, like, half the people in those movies slept on. And I don't know.
It's weird.
It was weird.
So weird.
It's all very weird.
Next up is Teresa, played by Amy Robinson. Nothing. She was fine. I don't understand why they gave her character epilepsy. I didn't understand it until like the very end. Like I didn't even pick up on it that's why his uncle didn't like her until we were talking about this earlier.
I got that. They
clue.
talked about it when, we had that scene in the bedroom that we talked about before. They mentioned it a couple times. I was kind of like, is this ever going to pay off? And it kind of did. They put her in a very stressful situation and she had a seizure and that slowed them down. And again, it caused Charlie to make a decision between Johnny Boy and someone else that he supposedly loved. And he chose Johnny Boy again. So, that was, it furthered the theme, if not the plot. And it just kind of showed, again, how some of these folks are just really bigoted. Not only against, Jewish people and black people and, all the other things that are in this movie, but then also against somebody with a disability. It's like, she's not right in the head. Okay. Epilepsy is not an intellectual disease, but, whatever. Doesn't make her morally, but whatever. Like, you're just, a lot of these people think in kind of backwards ways. And I think that was another thing that Martin Scorsese was just kind of trying to peel back the layer on.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that he chose Johnny Boy again. I mean, at some point, is he just in love with Johnny Boy? I can't understand that relationship, and I think that's what really grates on me.
He's on a mission from God. He's so obsessed with, can I save this guy? And I will do everything I possibly, like, it's become his life mission to turn Robert De Niro into a fully functioning human being. And anybody who's looking at this from the outside is like, that is not going to happen.
And then
I will say that before we leave Teresa, very male gazy, this movie. How many times do we need to see her tits? And it's like, can Harvey Keitel take off the white tank? Because he looks pretty hot and he would look even hotter. It's just not that I'm saying, nudity everywhere, but it's like, boy, we saw a lot of her boobs.
No, it was a lot of nips.
It was not necessary. It was not necessary to tell the story.
Well, we almost got full frontal from her too.
Yes.
There was... Yeah. She was fully exposed, and while he was like underneath his sheet, we got to see the chest.
She was walking around naked. We definitely got full backside nudity, if nothing else.
Plus, we also, the nudie bar, like the dancers, the go-go dancers I gotta say, like, some of the worst go-go dancing I think I've ever seen in my entire life.
But it just goes to show they didn't care. It was boobs.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You've got boobs and you've got pasties, and that's what's going on. And again, Diane was mostly there to say, oh, and these people are also racist. Look at that. Mm-hmm. Because she was a beautiful girl, and there was, and they said she's a beautiful girl. And I was like, yes, she is. And they were like, well, for a black girl. I'm like, oh, come on. That just,
Well, racist to the point where when Michael was showing the photo of the other girl that he was, I guess, interested in, and Tony looks at him and says, "Oh, I saw her, kissing a black guy," and then all of a sudden, Michael tore up the photo. He's like, he just starts crunching his face, like, "Oh, I can't see from them." That was just like a level of racism that was just like interesting that I can't, and it didn't. I guess it sets a stage of the area. But it didn't really ever play into the movie as necessary for me. Like, I guess it tells you a little bit about these people, but that's the only character development for the most part you're actually really getting. Is that
90% of this movie was painting a mood. It was painting a still portrait of mobsters in Little Italy without much of a story to kind of help you explore what was going on until the last 15 minutes. And there was a car chase and a bloody shootout and, an ambulance.
And who knows what happens after that. So, like, when the movie got interesting. Yeah, it's in a cliffhanger. For Meaner Streets. The sequel. Next up, Cesar Donava as Giovanni, who is the uncle. I wish we had gotten more of him. I seem like he actually would have been interesting. We just get one conversation with him and then, like, shots of him as a mafioso at meetings, and that was really it. So...
Again, I think that was kind of the point. It's like he's the big mobster, like he's the big cheese. He is the godfather of this movie, or as close as you get to him. And he's probably mid-level in, I mean, he's going to the Godfather and kissing his ring a lot, Giovanni, but he seems like a big shot to these low level hoods. But he kind of conducts himself like a businessman. There's not that much that's exciting about him. And I think part of maybe what Martin Scorsese was trying to do here is saying, folks, the mob is not that exciting. And they're kind of a bunch of assholes. Because look at how racist and anti-Semitic and anti-disability and anti-everything else they are. They're just a bunch of boring assholes.
And he grew up in, I guess, in a neighborhood like that. So I guess he would know more about it than myself. So I don't know. I was just expecting something more interesting. We do have 2 honorable mentions here.
3, actually. I've got one to add.
Oh, really? Okay, cool. David Carradine as the drunk that gets shot up.
So random.
So random. And then he's shot by his half-brother in real life. That was Robert Carradine as the boy with the gun.
Yeah. And I had to look up who the drunk was because I was like, he's a really good actor. He didn't even look like David Carradine to me. I mean, he didn't have that weathered face that I was kind of like, I know who David Carradine is, and I did not recognize him. And I was shocked when IMDb told me that was David Carradine. Like, that was... I mean, Uma Thurman could have just saved a lot of time. Just shoot him in a bar. Done.
Right?
Seriously.
I actually, I love my X-Ray on Amazon Prime, which is why I watched like all of these movies on Amazon Prime, and I paused it for some reason, and that's how I saw it. And I was like, wait, I'm sorry, what? And then when I went back, I was like, oh, okay. But I did actually see the 2 of them, both Carradines listed in the credits, and so, yeah, it was a nice little...
I just randomly saw Robert Carradine, and I'm like, wait a minute, I wonder if he's actually related, because I didn't know him. Like, I knew, is it Keith Carradine? Is the other brother? Yeah, I know Keith Carradine. So I just randomly selected it, and I didn't realize that the Carradine family was actually, like, Martha Plimpton is part of the Carradine family. I did not know
she
that.
is?
Yes.
I didn't know that either. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like a little dynasty, a little mini dynasty over there.
It is.
The honorable mention that I was going to say is Martin Scorsese as Jimmy Shorts, who you see at the beginning, and then also at the end in the car for the shootout.
He's the one who blows Robert De Niro away. Little director cameo.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Uh-huh. Also credited in my little X-ray. I was like, what?
Jimmy Shorts.
And then I went into a little bit of a rabbit hole because I was just curious. And he loves to cameo in his movies.
Yes, he
very
shows up a lot.
Hitchcockian in that sense. Or Stephen King also loves to cameo in his movies. So.
I mean, I kind of like that when you, I mean, it's like a hidden Mickey.
Yeah, I think it's fun.
Sometimes you just don't, it just like pops up.
Yeah. Look, if I'm making a movie, I would never direct a movie because I would be in the movie. Let's all be honest with each other about myself. But I would love if I were a director, like to just pop in, just like a little treat, little actor treat.
I definitely. You should be able to. You should pop on front screen. Yeah. I mean, maybe break the fourth wall. I'm
Something
okay with that.
Like that.
So I guess we kind of already touched on this, but like. Mean Streets or kind of aggressively pissy. I just can't. There was never. I said it before, and I say there was never any stakes. They just seemed to be just like kind of shoving each other around, acting like jerks. Like even down to the language, like the harsh language most of the time. Are you calling me a mook? Like, and like half of them didn't know what a mook was, and like, or a jerk off. It was I never felt any real tension going on in this movie, and that was the other thing. There was no stakes for Johnny being a jerk off that didn't actually pay anybody back until the very end of the film. I like, am I missing something? Like Scarface, fucking tension the entire movie. I mean, even if I didn't particularly care for that film, but there was like something to grab onto and like kept my interest the entire movie.
It was a mood piece. I mean, it's mood. That's all it was.
It was mood, and it was, I guess, a little history. You know, Martin Scorsese really wanted to set a scene and really like have lots of motivations for these characters. You know exactly where they were coming from, whether that was good or bad. Depends on how you viewed it.
Yeah,
I guess. Okay. No pizza, no steaks for me. Bond's got nothing on the Pope. We've kind of already guilt trips. So I guess that is the center of this film, is really just Charlie's guilt trip the entire time.
Yeah.
Oops.
Guilt's a real thing. It's a little less for Jewish guilt. Jewish guilt is less like, oh God, I'm like a horrible person, or I'm going to hell, or whatever, fill in the blank. Jewish guilt, at least for me, I do not speak for the whole Jewish community, is more like, oh, you didn't call your mother, or you didn't acknowledge this, or you didn't do that, or it's very like kind of naggy versus, oh, I'm a horrible person. But
and I'm going to hell. And I'm going
you are meant to feel like a horrible person because you did not do X,
and
Y, and Z.
the stakes are real for the Catholicism because it's like, heaven or hell. Those are your options. And if there are any stains on your soul, when you kick it, you are burning in an eternal pit of fire for the rest of your life.
Right.
And scene. I mean, it's just like, it is a real, and they start putting that in your head from day one.
See, Protestants, you're just like forgiven as long as you accept Jesus, so you don't really have to worry. Like, you shouldn't be going out and intentionally
we got to go to confession
sinning.
and say the 10 Hail Marys and say the 10 Our Fathers and all the other, and that's kind of when it started. Harvey Keitel's got that whole monologue about, these are just words. And I'm like, yeah, they are, because I always kind of wondered about that. It's like, I could say 10 Hail Marys in my sleep. It doesn't mean I mean it. It doesn't mean I'm even thinking about it. It's just like, you just say the words in the right order. And he's like, I'm gonna chart my own path for redemption. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, and it's going to be Robert De Niro. And I'm like, no.
You had me. You were going on the right. You were going on the right path.
Exactly. I was like, I was with you, Charlie. And then, boy, you really made the wrong. You got on the wrong horse.
Maybe I need to do some extensive study into Catholicism, and that maybe I'll
or
understand
not.
this movie a little bit more.
But believe me when I tell you, it is a real fucking thing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's why, like, a lot of, and we probably shouldn't talk politics, but I feel it's like why a lot of right-wing Protestant congressmen and stuff do the shit that really doesn't protect society, because it doesn't matter if they fuck up society because they're going to go to heaven anyways, so they don't really care. Fuck everybody else.
Yeah, they bought their plot. They gave the money to the church. They're done.
So since we're talking about Little Italy here, let's talk about the Big Meatball. So, I mean, New York generally called Big Apple. That's where I was trying to go for that joke. I don't know if anybody laughed. Probably not.
I sure didn't realize that.
I did not make that connection. I'm so sorry.
Sure didn't. But I like it.
Not every joke lands. So this movie
I know that? That is the truth.
This movie takes place in New York's Little Italy. But other than the accents, did you really get a sense of locale? As I started thinking about it, I kind of just thought this is like just generic city.
I mean, it definitely was during the Feast of San Gennaro, which is, as people know, a big festival in Little Italy. And I think that I did like that because I did think that added a little bit to the chaos or the chaoticness of the movie, because you have all these people, but, it's people who are not from Little Italy who go to the Feast of San Gennaro. I mean, especially now, I feel like it's gotten distilled throughout the years. But, you got a lot of tourists, you got a lot of interlopers in this movie. I might be getting too deep for this movie, but this movie is about an inside job. It's about people who live in Little Italy and, have lived there for years and do all of their business there and never really leave. And so, I don't know, maybe that was the juxtaposition, or maybe I'm giving Scorsese too much credit. I don't know.
Okay, no, that's a good point, and I'm now gonna go check out the Feast of Saint Gennaro because I did see the parade, so I realized it must have been some kind of holiday and festival that's going on there. I didn't know what one it was though.
Yeah, I think it's in the fall. I don't know too much about it. I just recognized what it was when I saw it.
Okay,
but I think it's the way this movie operates. It doesn't really tell you. And it presents something to you, it shows you, and it refuses to explain itself. It just says, here's a shot of a street festival. And if you know what it is, great. You can read a lot of that stuff into it. If you don't, oh well, we're just going to continue on. It says, other than the accents, did I get a sense of the locale? The accents and the locale were enough for me. I mean, it was clearly New York. Like every time they shot on the street, I'm like, that is a New York City street. And the lack of diversity, which is, we might look at as a failing in 2023, I kind of looked at it and was like, wow, these are a bunch of Italians who know a bunch of Italians and very few other people. So yes, they're clearly in this tiny little neighborhood. It did not feel like all of New York to me because there weren't enough different kinds of people to make that real. I mean, there was one black dancer at the bar and there was one Jewish girl at the end of the bar, and that was it. Everyone else that we met was part of this very kind of Italian clique of people. So yeah, this was clearly a small ethnic neighborhood in a big city.
And I guess maybe again that comes to a failing of me in understanding, and that's probably what this movie needed, was just to stay to this local neighborhood. It was really about the neighborhood and the people that live inside it.
And Martin Scorsese knows this neighborhood. I mean, this is where he's from. He's not trying to, make a movie about something he doesn't understand, which is probably why, when you come to it with some outside expectations in terms of, it's going to be like The Godfather, and it's not, it's just
I
really
thought it
not.
would be smaller than that movie, but I just was expecting more. So. Maybe The Godfather Light. That's what, just not middle management mafia. So, interesting nuggets. Not fun facts this time because there were really no fun facts, but some interesting nuggets.
Interesting nuggets. It's a good B-side.
This movie is now is known for its pop soundtrack. It has never actually released a soundtrack, though, for the movie. There's like 20-some songs inside this film because it really is like another character to the movie.
It was good. The music was good.
Yeah. The music really plays to you. I wonder if that's a rights thing. Like it costs a certain amount to say, can I use your song in my movie? And it costs another thing to actually release a soundtrack album that's got all these different songs on it. I tell you, I love that song, Be My Baby. And it was such a weird choice for the credits. Mm-hmm. It was a weird choice, but I loved it. I mean, yeah. I was so into it. So I thought that was great.
Yeah, I did enjoy the movie throughout. Each piece was kind of selected really well. Like even the one with the Rubber Biscuit song, like as they're all getting plastered out of their minds, was actually a really great song for to set the mood for like how blitzed they were about to get.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I don't know if these choices were quite as good as some of the stuff that Quentin Tarantino comes up with for his movies and how he places modern and or kind of retro music into his movies to create a mood, but it was close. It was very, for 1973, I realize this predates Quentin, but it felt very Tarantino-esque.
Well, I would imagine, talking about directors earlier, that really loved this movie, I would think that something like this would actually be inspiration for Quentin Tarantino and even
James Gunn,
like in his movies, selecting music. As this was a way that you can actually make films and do things. And kind of similar to American Graffiti, where American Graffiti was another movie where the music helped set the tone.
I love the soundtrack to American Graffiti. I thought they did such a good job.
Yeah, I think similarly, this movie did really well with use of music. So this movie started as a continuation of Scorsese's directorial debut, which was Who's That Knocking at My Door? Which also starred Harvey Keitel, and in a similar mood where he was a conflicted Catholic.
Okay.
Yeah. Scorsese's going through it, I guess.
Yeah, Scorsese's got some issues he's working out, which is, a lot of times where great art comes from. By the way, I don't know if this is a fun fact or not, but the original title for Mean Streets was supposed to be Season of the Witch, which is terrible.
That's awful.
And it's not much better than Who's That Knocking at My Door. Might even be worse.
All very bad.
Yeah. So whoever said, what about Mean Streets? That works for me. I'm actually gonna thank that person and say, good job.
Mean Streets. It's a reference to Raymond Chandler's essay, The Simple Art of Murder.
Okay.
Which
Chandler knows from Urban Crime, I guess.
True.
All right.
I don't know that a simple act of murder has anything to do with this movie, because I don't know that the murder was actually fully committed, and I don't think that was a simple act. You would like chasing people down the street and trying to shoot into a moving car.
But I could see where Chandler could again, this is a mood piece, so it's like, is describing the mood is, on the mean streets of New York. I get it.
Yeah.
Or the slightly aggravated streets. I don't know.
Slightly spicy streets.
So, are you guys ready for a game?
Yes.
Let's do it.
Okay. So, as I think any of the listeners can tell, I was really not that enthralled with this film. So, I think we're going to remake it and do it
shocked.
better.
No, stop
I'm
it.
shocked, Matthew.
Stop it.
Maybe it was just my week. I've been angry all week, and I probably shouldn't have watched this movie in that mood. So I've just
I think you probably would not have enjoyed it no matter what. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is probably just not the movie for you, and that's okay.
So I feel like there was something here to work with, though. So I feel like we're going to remake this movie. So your challenge is to decide what you're going to keep and what you're going to change. I want you to cast Charlie, Teresa, Johnny, and Michael. Those are the 4 real characters that mattered in the film. If you want to cast anybody else, that's fine. And then who do you want to direct? Okay. Eric, I'm going to go with you first because you seem to like this movie more.
Okay. So we're doing a remake. What am I going to change? First of all, I'm going to make it a little bit more expansive. We're not going to just be in Little Italy anymore. In fact, most of this movie is going to be in Harlem, but I'm going to, shake up the cast a little bit. And I just kind of thought of this one, but I think that you're right, Matt. I'm going to give the audience maybe a little bit more of a clue in terms of why Charlie feels like he needs to protect Johnny all the time.
Okay.
Because I think that if that were stronger and if you understood why he was trying to do this, maybe you'd root for him a little bit more, as opposed to just spending the entire movie going, Charlie, stop. Just stop. It's not worth it. Even if you feel that, you'd want to understand where that's coming from. So my Charlie, because again, Charlie is a good guy. Like, Charlie is a good, decent person. And I wanted an actor that really that always got that across for me. And when this actor plays a good and decent person, I always really feel it. And that was Lakeith Stanfield, known for Judith and the Black Messiah, Sorry to Bother You. Great little cameo in Get Out, where he was the guy who just, started, the tear just kind of came down his face because he was one of the first folks who was just kind of possessed and taken over in that movie. And I just think he's so good at just being this rock, and this he stands for good morals and all that kind of stuff. I am going to make this. I wondered again. Let's give a little bit more insight into why he wants to keep his relationship with Teresa a secret. So for Teresa, I'm going to cast, and I'm not sure if I'm saying this correctly, Taissa Farmiga, who's Vera Farmiga's little sister. She was in American Horror Story Coven, which I hated, but she was pretty good in that. And she's now in her late 20s, I think early 30s. So I think she's probably the right age for this. And I think making it an interracial relationship, as soon as they say, let's keep it secret, you haven't told anybody, we'll understand a little bit more about why that's so necessary for them to do. So that means Johnny is going to be Italian-American as well. And I thought, okay, this is where you might think I'm a little nuts, but I was like, if this actor were up for a more dramatic challenge, I'm thinking who is a slightly annoying white guy who thinks he can hang with Lakeith Stanfield and all of his, and he's just way in over his head, but he thinks he's really cool, but he's really, really not. And I thought, oh, Pete Davidson. And no more tattoo removal, Pete. You got to be all tatted up for this one, because that's going to be. And I think that he and Taissa Farmiga would play really well as cousins who really don't like each other. But that would also be kind of, where that was going. And then for Michael, I cast. Did you ever see Dear White People? The lead for that, when he was much younger, is Tyler James Williams, who also played young Chris Rock in Everybody Hates Chris back in that sitcom. Anyway, he's older now too, and Michael just needs to be kind of, again, to your point, Matt, he's like, give it up. Like, you're never going to get this money. Like, he's a little officious and he's kind of annoying, but also needs to be a little menacing. And so I thought that, given his history, and people go, oh my God, that's the Everybody Hates Chris guy. But I think that also he's a little older. He's got a little bit more gravitas right now. And I think that would be a good add to this particular cast. So there we are. That's my cast for Meaner Streets.
Cool. Okay. I like it. And do you have a director?
Because he likes this movie so much, and maybe would want to take a stab at it, I'm gonna make this a Spike Lee joint. I think we're gonna just say,
I like that.
Spike, this movie meant a lot to you, so let's have you put your spin on it, and see where it goes.
Okay, Allie, how about you?
Okay, so I am currently obsessed with the show The Bear. And so I have decided that this movie is going to be an homage to the family and the bear. So Charlie is going to be John Bernthal, whom I love. And, he's hot also. Mm-hmm. So right there with Harvey Keitel. And I think that he could really handle this role. And he's just so good. And also he is a Maryland native, a Montgomery County native, which, I love that. My Teresa is going to be Ao Edebiri, and so it's not going to be that she has epilepsy. It's because it's just going to be that she's a Black person. That is the issue with Teresa. And Johnny is going to be Jeremy Allen White, star of The Bear, and Michael is going to be Eben Moss Backrack, who plays Cousin Richie. So they all have such good chemistry anyway. And if you haven't seen the second season of The Bear, you will know what I'm talking about when you get to the family episode, which was so stressful and so amazing that I had to do it in 2 parts. I could not watch the whole thing. It's very claustrophobic and stressful, but top-notch acting. And Sofia Coppola, because she comes from that background, is going to direct My Meaner Streets.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah.
I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's going to be elements of mine from both of yours inside mine.
Okay.
So I agree with you, Eric, that we really need to have more of a reason for the relationship. So Charlie's reason to protect Johnny is, they kind of grew up together. They know each other from the neighborhood, but it's really because Teresa asks him to, because she knows her cousin is no good and she's worried about him. So it's his love for Teresa that is actually protecting Johnny throughout this film.
That would work.
And that's going to be obvious with their relationship. I also did not like the epilepsy thing. I think it was too much. I mean, I can understand the racism, because in 1973, I think we had a lot more of it. So that made more sense. And if I'm going to put it back in that time, I'm going to keep it. But I like the idea. I'm going to do the same thing that everybody did here. Teresa's actually going to be mixed. So she's going to have, one parent is of one ethnicity and another of Italian. So that's how, Johnny ends up being Italian, but she is mixed. And that's the reason that, Charlie really can't date her. Not, per his family. So my Charlie is going to be played by Gabriel Basso. So I don't know if you guys watched The Night Agent on Netflix.
I did.
Just is the main character there, just kind of a stand-up guy. I kind of feel that way from Charlie, but kind of hapless in what's going on there. So I get the same vibe, and I thought, okay, I'm tired of seeing all big names everywhere. I want to pull in some smaller names if I can. So I thought he did a really good job. I was going to have Teresa played by Zoe Kravitz. I think she would be. I want to give her more of a role in the movie. That was the other thing that kind of irritated me, is that Teresa's just kind of there as a thing. She doesn't really have a real role. I want her to have more of a role in the film. My Johnny is going to be Pete Davidson. I was thinking the same thing because I've been watching Bupkis. And he's likable. Every scene that he is in, no matter what, Pete Davidson is likable. And I think for this to work, I think Johnny still has to be likable as a person, even though he's hapless and just is just consumed by gambling. Like, he is a gambling addict and he can't get out of it. My Michael is going to be slightly older than everybody else. So my Michael is actually going to be played by Bradley Cooper. I think Bradley Cooper can play a really good villain. I like Bradley Cooper a lot. And I think he's got that smoldering tension. He seems like a really nice guy, but he will fuck you up if you mess with him. And I want Michael to be more menacing. The Michael in the original movie was just not menacing. Like, I would have thought he was a jerk off too and never paid him back. And I was going to actually cast Giovanni because there's going to be more of a relationship between Michael and Giovanni. So, because they're actually going to be closer in age and friends. And the fact that, Michael is a loan shark that hangs out with these kids every now and then, he's really just trying to, do his job. He's looking for people that need money. That's why he hangs out with younger kids, because they're always looking for cash to spend. My Giovanni is going to be played by Bobby Cannavale.
Who's great.
So,
yeah.
Yes. And then I'm going to have this directed by Andrea Berloff. Andrea Berloff directed The Kitchen with Melissa McCarthy, which was a crime drama. I really liked that movie. It kind of got panned, but I actually really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it far more than this film. And that was Tiffany Haddish, Melissa McCarthy, and Elizabeth Moss in that film.
I heard of it. I didn't see it.
Yeah, I didn't see it either, but yeah.
I really enjoyed it. I actually thought it was a really good movie. And there kind of took a couple of twists and turns that go on in the film. Like I said, it got mediocre reviews, but I think it should have got better reviews than it did. But that is basically where I'm sitting on this film. So,
excellent.
I like it.
Cool. Okay, so last up, for any of our viewers that are joining us for the first time, I'm so sorry, it's this film. Well, we always end our shows with a skip, rent, or buy. Skip is fuck this film, I'm never paying it back, it's a jerk off. Rent is, I'll hang out and have a drink with it. And then buy is, man, I really, really, really want to work for the mafia in middle management. So starting in reverse, Allie, you go first.
I am a Rent. I felt like there wasn't any plot. I'm pretty sure I said that to you guys while I was watching it, but it didn't bore me. I always like to see these sort of, big movie stars young, and, sort of in their prime, and Harvey Keitel's hotness was a nice surprise. It wasn't super long. So yeah, I'm a Rent. I will probably never watch it again, but, didn't bother me. I'm sort of neutral about it, I guess.
Eric?
Yeah, I'm also a Rent. I'm kind of more on the side. I think as someone who just, enjoys movies, I can now say I've seen Martin Scorsese's kind of first big movie. I saw Harvey Keitel and Robert De Niro give decent performances as young actors. A lot of it was about the potential that would come, I think, to greater fruition later on. If anyone ever came to me and says, "Hi, I've never seen Mean Streets," I would say, "Okay, you have fun with that. Bye." I probably am not going to watch it again. Don't need to. I will say, when the plot finally kicked in, like the last 15 minutes, I was into this movie. Like, I was like, holy shit, things are happening. Let's go. And then it kind of ended, and I was like, oh, and we're credits. Okay. I wish the movie had been more of that in the first hour and a half, but it is what it is. And, as an ex-Catholic, I was like, that just confirms to me that I am not going to try to do stupid shit to avoid hell. That's like not a path that I'm following, and I'm kind of happy about that. So it's always good when a movie validates your life choices. I'm a Rent.
And for those listening, I am not a cinephile. I am not educated on cinema. Cinema, I would say avoid this movie at all costs. It is not worth your time. Martin Scorsese has much better films under his belt now. And maybe go and watch his first movie instead. Who's that knocking at the door? Maybe that's better. I would probably give that a chance instead. I really just did not enjoy this movie. And to your point, there's only 15 minutes of actual plot, and you don't even get a substantial ending. The three characters just go off. Like, we have no idea if anybody lives, dies.
Well, 2 of them get piled into an ambulance, so I assume they're going to make it.
Maybe, maybe not. I was kind of surprised that they pulled her out and she was walking.
They were walking.
I mean, she had a hand outside this, like in a dead pose. Like, I would have been happier had the ambulance never got there and we just ended at that scene. But the fact that they pulled her out and walked her to the ambulance is just like, okay, in next week's episode, I mean, avoid this movie. It is just not a good movie. I'm just going to say it. For me. This has been the Rewind Project. Up next week, we will talk about The Exorcist. Thanks for joining. I'm Matt.
I'm Allie.
I'm Eric.
Be kind. Rewind.
You've been listening to The Rewind Project. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, and Google Play. Please subscribe and rate us. It helps a lot. We love your comments and questions. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and via our new phone number at 202-618-2402. Thanks for listening. Be kind. Rewind.
I would actually like a big meatball right now.
It's a big meatball.
I would like
That's
a big meatball. It's a spicy meatball.
And there's my tag.